Hello, I am the GrubStLodger, and I've been off all August. Basically, what I've been doing is mooching about. I've gone to a lot of museums. I went to Bath, I went to Stratford-upon-Avon, I went to some museums in Lincolnshire, and I did a lot of writing. And I went to a competition, the Novel London competition. I spent all day there. I was on a panel, I did a reading. I came third in the writing prize, so it was a pretty good August all round. And I read a lot. And here are some of my thoughts on the books I read. The first book I read was called Poor Things by Alasdair Gray, and if you like unreliable narrators, then this is the book for you. It has three. The main story purports to be the memoirs of a man called McCandles. There's a sort of secondary bit which denies everything from the main story, which purports to be from his wife. And then there's also an editor who puts the things together. And you can't really trust any of these people. Depending on who you believe, it's either a weird fantasy by a strangely jealous man, a historical oddity, or a kind of Victor Frankenstein tale. According to the longest part of the narrative, a large, hideous, mismatched man who we kind of guess has been made Frankenstein's monster style, clears out the brain of a dead woman who's drowned, also takes out the brain of the fetus that's inside her, puts the fetus's brain in hers, and then tries to raise her up to be his wife. It's a very strange book. It uses all these unreliable narrators to play and to throw these sort of silly things up against each other and see what sticks. It was enjoyable. Yeah, it was enjoyable, but a little icky at times, that whole central conceit about the fetus brain in the woman. And so then you have this woman going about who has a woman's body but like a childlike brain, and she's sort of tricked, manipulated, and the child brain inside her discovers her sexuality and doesn't know how to control it, and it goes some very strange places. It would be a very odd fetish, but mainly it's there for daft jokes, and as daft jokes go, it was quite fun. The next is a book called The Unburied by Charles Palliser, someone who I've met a couple of times because he went to my university and did lectures when I was doing an MA there about authors' research. This is another book full of unreliable narrators. It has three mysteries in it, one which is a mystery about a story about King Arthur, the other which is a mystery about some people that went missing 200 years before the book's set, and another is a murder mystery that's happening as the plot goes on, and each is influenced by the other. And the point of the book is sort of to say how memory is unreliable, witnesses are unreliable, everyone who has first-hand account of an event has it for a reason and has their own processes and biases behind it. And so it's actually ends up being more about history and about how we tell history than an actual murder mystery plot. If you're going in it for the murder mystery plot, you would be a little bit disappointed. It's a little bit slow. But if you're in it for the whole discussion of reliability and memory and things like that, it's actually quite fun. And it's written in a really good Victorian pastiche style. It's terrible when that goes wrong, but this guy did it well. Pretty good. Another book I read in August was The Faithless, Lollybird and Other Stories. This is by Joan Aiken. And if you've ever read a Joan Aiken short story collection, you sort of know what's going to happen. It's written for children, though I think adults can enjoy it too. It's got a very simple kind of storytelling style, and they're all kind of not quite magical realist, but it's a real world with bits of magic seeping in, or for some of the stories, just a world where magic is accepted, or really peculiar happenings. There was one which was all about exploding dough from Carpathia. There's one where a bunch of cats keep a man alive. She often writes these stories about this family called the Armitage family, and the dad is resolutely normal, and the children and sometimes the mum have all these magical adventures with witches and people turning into things, and the dad just doesn't notice. And in that one, a little kid gets turned into a big wolf. and they're really nice to read. They're real refreshing. Um, they're just pleasant. I really like them. They're funny. They're entertaining. They're well written. And a Joan Aiken short story will always get a thumbs up from me. The next book is called The Golden Child by Penelope Fitzgerald. I love Penelope Fitzgerald. She writes these really, really short, very dense books that often cut off at the end. They often don't have a proper ending, and you're left hanging. She's really precise. It's like a well-cut diamond. It's a real tonic when you've read something that's too verbose and goes on too long. Just a little Penelope Fitzgerald book. This was her first novel and is much more ordinary in structure. It's kind of a spy novel, I suppose. There's a spot-on parody of the Tutankhamun craze at the British Museum, and it's for this thing called The Golden Child. And there's something not quite right about it, and I'm not going to go into the mystery. It was very good fun. It wasn't really like her other books in that, it was just structured like a normal novel, and you can see where she then developed this into her kind of signature style. But she's on point with her observations of people, and she makes some really good, funny look at the British Museum and the whole thing about going to museums in general and people being told that they have to go and see this thing, even if it was something they hadn't heard of or weren't interested in before. And yeah, very, very good. The next book was A Life of Beau Nash by Oliver Goldsmith. Oliver Goldsmith being one of my other favourite writers, one of my favourite 18th century authors. I hadn't read this one before. It's a biography, which is not something Goldsmith did very often, and he does a really nice job. Beau Nash was a gambler who went to Bath, and he became the master of ceremonies, and so he set the tone for the place, and he made rules against duelling, and he set sort of politeness rules and what you should wear when, and he was kind of in charge of keeping the tone of the place up, and he also ran quite a few gambling things on the side. And this book reveals him to be silly, pathetic, childish, but kind, and someone who is doing as much good as they can, despite their limitations. So you quite like Beau Nash by the end of it. You feel he was a pretty decent person who had some very small talents, but put them to good use in a very small place, making Bath a better place to stay. And it was very interesting. It was Goldsmith. Goldsmith writes like a dream. He's really easy to read, and he found some great stories. My favourite one being that Beau Nash put up this huge granite column in a place called Queen Square, and it was dedicated to Prince Frederick, who was Prince of Wales, who actually died shortly after getting hit by a cricket ball. But when this was dedicated, he was still alive. And Beau Nash went and paid Alexander Pope, the great poet, a great deal of money to come up with an inscription. And Pope kept sending it back and saying, look, I don't do inscriptions, this isn't my kind of thing, go find someone else. But Beau Nash insisted that he needed Pope's words. And so what Pope sent was the most generic, this monument was built for the memory of Prince Frederick for his support of Bath, erected by Richard Nash. And Beau Nash paid all the money for it. I liked it. The next book is also called Beau Nash and is also by one of my more favourite writers, William Harrison Ainsworth. Or was it William Ainsworth? I always forget. He's one of my favourites. I just can never remember which way around it is. No, William Harrison. The next book is also called Beau Nash and is also by another one of my favourite writers, William Harrison Ainsworth. It's a novel. It's not really about Beau Nash. It's about Bath in the 18th century, and it's about a wife who cheats on her husband, and lots of duels happen, and then two young people get together. It's kind of a tapestry of cliches, really. Not the best William Harrison Ainsworth I've read, I have to say. He's not playing to his strengths. His strengths are weird, crazy things happening. I mean, one of his novels started within 10 pages. There was a man stealing heads off some spikes, who then collapsed down almost dead, who was revived by the Philosopher's Stone, killed his granddad and ran off, and that was the first 7 pages. Another one starts with a huge storm with someone clinging onto the struts of London Bridge. The most exciting thing that happens in this is duels, really, and not particularly well told ones. That said, if you like watching Neighbours, which is not something I regularly do, but every now and again you can watch it and you can laugh because it's silly and the acting's bad and it makes you laugh. And to be honest, that was kind of how I enjoyed this book. Though it did lead me to learn quite a lot about the Reverend Wood, who wrote The Spiritual Quixote, which I haven't read yet, but it's on the shelves back there, and I might go for that one day. Yeah, not his best, but sitting in Bath reading that, it felt right. The next book is called The Bachelors by Muriel Spark. Muriel Spark wrote The Prime and Miss Jean Brodie, which I really enjoyed. I'm not sure why I was attracted to a story about men in their 30s to 50s living in North London by themselves. Who knows why that would appeal to me. It was sold as a satire on these bachelors, and it started off like one. There was all these little fussy men in all their little fussy lifestyles, and to be honest, I perfectly related. But it became more about spiritualism. One of the bachelors is being under trial for conning an old woman out of her money, for his finding the dead, his spiritualism, seances and stuff. And all the other bachelors pile in on different sides of this, and some of them are professional witnesses in the trial, others character witnesses, others just watch. It seems like she started writing one book, couldn't find enough in it, and then went into this other book about spiritualism. So it doesn't quite hold together, but there's a really nice twist of irony at the end to do with the man on trial and his girlfriend and the way she might tie him down, and that makes a really sour point about bachelors. I'm going to leave it to you to find a copy of the book if you want to find out what that is. Yeah, not the best book of the month, but good enough. The next book of the month was Goodbye to All That by Robert Graves. Now, Robert Graves wrote the I, Claudius stories. I loved the TV show. I very much enjoyed the books. I actually preferred the TV show, which is kind of rare, but I did enjoy the books a great deal anyway. This is his biography, his autobiography, and it takes him from childhood up until his late 20s. And it tells first his school stories. He went to Charterhouse, and it was all about the just the weird ancient system of bullying they've got going on there. Bullying and same-sex friendships that go a little bit far. It's not quite a sexual... Well, there is sexual elements. It's an odd relationship. It seems to exist purely in these private schools, of which I don't know much about. But what was important about this beginning at the schools is that he then signed up to the army during World War One, and the way the army's run is pretty much the way that the private school is run. There's all these strange rules, all this etiquette, all these hierarchies that get in the way of modern warfare, and the book just keeps piling on details of the absurdity of this, but also just the absurdity of war and the effect it's having on him and the people he meets. He becomes good friends with Siegfried Sassoon and encourages his poetry, for example. And there's this odd kind of element that you feel that there are all these aspiring poets who would have just sat around writing dull poems about sparkling water, and First World War gave him something proper to write about, and that's what he does in this book. And it's gripping, and it's moving and kind of depressing. And then he rushes the end, saying that he got accused of murder, he split up with his wife and moved away at the end. And I really don't understand what that's about. But yeah, The school stuff's very interesting because it's completely alien world, and the World War One stuff is very interesting because it really gives across what it might have been like to be there. Makes me very glad I was not. The next book I read was Good Omens, which is a book I've meant to read for years and years, being the kind of thing I would have loved when I was 16. I loved kind of knockabout, silly, religious-based stuff. I hadn't seen the TV programme. I thought I'd have a go at the book. And I did, and it was funny, and there were some good lines in it, and it reminded me a lot of Monty Python in that it's something I loved, and I would have loved this book, but now it's something that mainly irritates me. There seem to be two very good novels in there. The novel of Adam the Antichrist, who is kind of this gee-whiz, Just William person who discovers that they have ultimate power. And then the story of the demon and the angel who are friends, Azrael and Crowley. And I don't know, neither of the stories go anywhere really because they're too busy trying to find the jokes. Sorry for that. A book I read when I was 16 by Tom Holt called Faustum Unequals kind of does the same thing, you know, silly humour about heaven and hell and demons and that. In that hell is a theme park and it's just been bought up and they're trying to do it up and make it good. I don't see why Good Omens has all of this cult following and Faustum Unequals doesn't. They both seem as kind of lightweight, joke hungry, slightly irritating, to be honest. Bit smart ass. Yeah, entertaining enough. It's alright. And the last book I read in August was called An Awfully Big Adventure. It's by Beryl Bainbridge, who I've also met actually. And she, it was a long time ago now because she did. She wrote a very good novel about the last days of Samuel Johnson called According to Queenie, and I never got round to reading anything else by her. So I read this, and it's set in Liverpool in the 50s and is about a woman. She's about 16, she's just coming into maturity, and she is a stagehand. And so a lot of it is backstage gossip and drama. And then there's this really horrible twist at the end. And again, you'll have to find a copy to find out what the twist is. It puts a real dark light on the rest of the book. But while the book's going, it's quite entertaining. And if you've ever done any acting, I did quite a lot of amateur acting when I was a kid, you feel that sort of buzz of being behind stage, and it really puts that across. But yeah, it has a pretty... the ending socks it to you. So yeah, that was all I read over August. I enjoyed most of what I read, and even the things I didn't enjoy as much had their good moments. But I can't say there were any huge standout I love that books in August. It could have been I was just getting through them too quickly, I don't know. But yeah, a lot of solid, decent stuff, but nothing that made me go, wow. We'll see what September brings. In the August moon, light midnight of light noon.